Boxes by Irene, a short story. Written by Lindsey Loucks. Read for you by Hayden. As soon as I snapped under booted feet outside, Lord Grumblepuss slinked around a display case, tail swatting at my ankles, and padded up to the front door of my store. Black tail held high, he stopped to sniff the letter slot. The footsteps grew louder as they climbed the porch, and even though a door separated the mailman from me, I hid my hands behind my back as I always did when strangers were near. The letter slot tipped open, letting a winter chill waft inside, and a deluge of envelopes poured in. Lord Grumblepuss batted them away with frenzied paws as if they were attack bees. The envelope's stiff corners knocked into the hardwood floor with loud thwacks. Then the postman's fingers wiggled into the letter slot, a farewell for me and a deadly salute to the cat. Lord Grumblepuss leaped up and slammed the slot closed, the postman's fingers pulling back to safety just seconds before. "Was that really necessary?" I asked. Lord Grumblepuss turned, sat on the throne of letters, and gazed at me with ice blue eyes as if I were the one who ought to question my sanity. I'd already done plenty of that. Still did. Probably should do more since to my cat, I was obviously lacking. Echo, my younger sister, bounded up next to me panting, the pretty blush that permanently stained her cheeks now a deeper hue. She wore her black curls piled on top of her head, some of which had spilled loose over the shoulders of her gray sweater dress. She'd planted her red pleather shoes on her hands instead of her feet because, well, I didn't really know why. "Do you hear him?" she asked between wheezes. The shop went silent as we listened. Even Lord Grumblepuss tilted a velvet black ear. Then, from somewhere near the shelves stocked with my handmade boxes, a cricket chirped. "Gah!" Echo threw her head back as if to implore the ceiling. "Billy always escapes my pocket when it's about to snow. It's like he turns into a kamikaze cricket on a snow cone bender." She pointed to Lord Grumblepuss. "And you are not helping me hunt him." The cat flicked his tail, giving her the same look he'd given me. Smartass. Echo heaved a sigh, clapped her red shoes together, and stalked off toward a hope chest display along the far wall. "Fine, Billy, you want a war? I'll give you." I shook my head after her, then lifted an eyebrow at Lord Grumblepuss. "Well?" He rubbed his black paw over a corner of the topmost envelope, and then sashayed away to his favorite heating vent. His work for the day was done. Whatever items needed opening in the other letters he hadn't chosen weren't deemed as important, or at least not as important yet. I kept all the letters he hadn't selected in my old workshop in case what the postman delivered daily wasn't up to snuff to the old cat. I bent to retrieve his chosen envelope. The return address read, Ray Delper, 135 North Willow Street, which was approximately 3 miles from here. A flutter rippled through my stomach, along with the usual lead weight that yanked my nerves piano wire tight. After inhaling a long breath, I blew it out on my smoking fingertips, a nervous habit I'd had since childhood. The blowing, I mean. The smoking had been around since birth, thick tendrils coiling out of my fingers in a constant stream. It only stopped when I touched a box. Therefore, boxes were kind of my thing. Hand-making them, selling them in the shop with my younger 18-year-old sister, and opening those that had been cursed, spelled, or created by a super-intelligent alien race. Side note, super-intelligent alien boxes are a breeze to open compared to those that have been cursed or spelled. Side note, aliens do exist. So, boxes were my jam, but my nerves jangled because I didn't do people. Those who came along with the unopenable boxes, I mean. People were too complex to fit into tidy boxes, too slippery in their ideals to stay contained for very long, too fragile even inside a protective box made of muscle and bone. Therefore, people made me anxious. Their quick judgments helped erect the box-shaped trust issues around my heart. Which is why I spent my days with Echo, who couldn't hurt a cricket, and who wasn't a person at all, but a witch like me. Most witches were deemed quacks or charlatans from the witch label alone, which was why we mostly kept to ourselves and tried not to draw much attention. With fingers that smoked like chimneys unless I touched a box, that was an everyday challenge for me. "Ray Delper," I called to Echo. She lay face down on the floor by the shelf, peering underneath it and muttering something about rippy bits. No rush. I laid the letter next to the old-fashioned cash register only she knew how to operate. She dealt with the customers for obvious reasons. I created various sized boxes in the safety of my workshop, the openable, beautiful, and ornate kind. About once a week or so, Echo invited someone chosen by Lord Grumblepuss to come to the shop who couldn't open something. That didn't include our elderly shop neighbors of Smithson's Hardware and their weekly jar of pickles, but those were sometimes hell to open too. Echo's special invitations forced me to interact with people. She thought that was a big deal for some reason, but more importantly, it brought in extra money for our store, Boxes by Irene. 4 hours later, I sat at the long stained oak table in my box-shaped workshop, surrounded by aged wood, tools, and an assortment of clasps, locks, and keys. Gray light filtered through the gauzy off-white curtains at my back. Dozens of rose and sandalwood candles burned around the room, and hovering over their sweet smell was the savory scent of Echo's stew she was making for dinner. I'd lived above the store to save money for about 6 months. Word was still out on whether that had been a smart financial decision. Echo knocked on the door and entered, a flush to her cheeks and a mischievous grin pinned to her mouth. I twirled the last screw into a hope chest lock. "Did you catch Bill?" She wrung her hands, now shoeless, and glanced behind her. "You have a visitor." "No." My stomach clamped around the PB&J I'd had for lunch. Usually, I had more time to mentally prepare, to physically prepare. The bell sleeves of my light blue lace top were stained brown with varnish. My dark curls kept flopping into my face, making them even more frizzy when I yanked them behind my ear. And horror of all horrors, I wasn't wearing a bra. "Ray Delper." She nodded so quickly I thought her head would tip off her neck. "He said he didn't think he'd be able to come today because he works nights at the hospital. He's a radiology technician, but he asked for the address anyway, and then he just showed up." "Echo!" My voice pitched higher. I flew my hands up and blew on my smoking fingertips as if I could blow this Ray guy away. "That's not okay. He can't just—" A brute of a man appeared behind my sister, tall, imposing, his shoulders taking up the width of the doorway. Fresh snow glistened in his dark, windswept hair, and wet splotches dotted his open leather coat, which revealed a black Henley underneath, the top few buttons undone. His brown eyes settled on me, then widened slightly. A flurry of sensations erupted from my belly and spread warmth between my thighs. I swallowed and dropped my hands to the nearest box, only vaguely aware that my mouth was still shaped in a blowing pucker. Hopefully, he thought the burst of smoke from my fingertips was just the nuclear bomb that had exploded my insides with his presence. "Sorry," the man said. "I can come back if now's not a good time." "No, you're fine." Echo wriggled her eyebrows at me, then slid past him out the door. When he stepped inside the workshop out of her way, she turned and licked her lips at the back of his head. We didn't get out much. I shooed her the rest of the way out with a jerk of my head, but it probably looked as if I'd lost all muscle control. Should I sit?" He gestured to the wooden chair on the other side of the table and then shrugged out of his coat. "Probably." There, that fixed my puckered mouth. But the rest of me zeroed in on his perfectly shaped, full lips, his dark, intelligent eyes, the hint of scruff around his chiseled jaw, and the way his black Henley clung to his chest. He gave off some serious sex appeal. His brow wrinkled as he hung his coat on the back of the chair and lowered himself into it. "So, how does this work?" "Well," I took in a deep breath. He was just a man, nothing to lose my head about. I ticked my gaze at his empty hands. "It would help if you had something to open." Echo burst through the door then, humming one note continuously. She carried a black box only slightly bigger than the hope chests in front of me, about 8 inches across and 3 inches high, and gently set it down on one side of the table. One corner of it was scuffed, with splinters poking through a small, dark patch. It had no visible seams, a keyhole, or any indication of movable parts. Pretty typical for an unopenable box. "Sorry about that," she said. Lord Grumblepuss was sitting on it. Wait, that hadn't been her humming. It came from the box. She vanished through the door again, shutting it behind her, but not before Lord Grumblepuss streaked past her and leaped onto the table, his pupils dilated and glued to the box. "It hums?" I asked loud enough so the man, Ray, could hear me. He nodded. "For a while now." Lord Grumblepuss stepped up onto the box and sat on it, his girth muffling the hum to a pleasant white noise. "Hey, be polite," I scolded. "I'm sorry. Do you mind if my cat sits on your box?" "Not at all," Ray chuckled, a deep but cheery sound, and started to reach his hand underneath Lord Grumblepuss's nose. My warning fell out in a spastic wobble. "I wouldn't if you want to keep your fingers." "Well, I wouldn't want to lose them," he smiled. "My fingers are magic, so I'm told." I wasn't quite sure how to interpret that, and his face was a mask of rugged innocence, so I confirmed I was a pervert and moved on. "Why is it scuffed on the corner there?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "I may have run over it to get it open." "May have?" I squeaked. "Just once." A sheepish twitch curled the corner of his mouth. "Maybe 5 times. It didn't work." I schooled my expression, or tried to anyway. Not all boxes are meant to be opened, but he probably didn't know that. Still, I felt bad for the poor box. "Can you tell me about yourself?" I asked. "Sorry, what's this we're doing? I thought I came here for you to open my box." He sat back and crossed his arms, the candlelight flickering humor in his dark eyes. "I'm not a box." I nodded. "No, you're not. I just need to know how you came upon your box, where and when, and who you are." "You didn't read my letter?" "My sister reads all correspondence, but she didn't fill me in. We only just received your letter today." He sighed. "I put it in the mail 3 weeks ago. We live in the same town. How could it possibly take 3 weeks for a letter to be delivered?" "You're not a box, I'm not a postwoman," I shrugged. "You're asking the wrong person." He leaned forward and posted his elbows on the table, a frown cupping his perfect mouth. "I don't want to tell you how to run your business, but have you ever heard of technology? Computers? Email?" "Yes, we required letters with postage stamps and awful-tasting envelope glue. Bonus points in the form of a 10% off discount if the letters were handwritten. Boxes by Irene hadn't entered the digital age because computers were the wrong types of boxes. It didn't seem to matter much that technology was box-shaped. My fingers kept smoking on the rare occasion that I touched computers, phones, or any other type of gadget, and all the technology I'd touched had proved to be worthless anyway. "I've heard of these things of which you speak," I said with narrowed eyes. "And?" "And my business is doing just fine without computers." He bowed his head, a troubled expression pinching his eyebrows together. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend." "Don't worry about it," I said. "I can go get your letter if you want me to, or you can recite it to me, plugging in all the little details you probably left out." He glanced up, his gaze sharp, as if I caught him red-handed. Sometimes to open an object, another thing, or person had to be opened first. I'd given him a figurative key. Now all he had to do was bring out whatever he wanted me to hear. "My brother gave it to me about 2 years ago. Said he bought it off some lady on a street corner in Vegas. So, of course, I had to ask him if he was sure she wasn't a hooker." I winged up an eyebrow. "Of course." He said no, but he said she thrust the box at him, almost desperate to get rid of it. Or maybe just to give it to him? He wasn't sure. She even offered it to him for free. What made him think she wanted to give it to just him? It was a crowded street on a Friday evening in Sin City. She could have given it to literally hundreds, thousands of people. He said he just passed a transvestite and a dog dressed as a robot, and then there she was, right in front of him, carrying this box. Was it humming then? His jaw flexed, and he gazed over my shoulder at the curtained window. No. Curious, I sawed my teeth across my lower lip, waiting. Shadows passed behind his eyes like a flickering memory. It started humming the night he died. My heart squeezed for him. His obvious grief plucked at my sympathy since I knew exactly how he felt. "That's more than what was in the letter," he said, his voice gruff. Questions about his brother and how he died gnawed at my brain, but for his benefit, I kept them to myself. "Well, if you're ready, I'll see what I can do." At Ray's nod, I turned to Lord Grumblepuss, who daintily stepped off the box and sat behind it to observe. Now free from the cat's heft, the hum in the box stayed the same volume as when he'd sat on it. It was as if it was matching the low rumble of a cat's purr, even though Lord Grumblepuss only purred while high on catnip. I shot my hands toward the humming box with just a faint trail of smoke and scooted it between Ray and me. The smoke faded into nothingness after my fingertips touched the wood. A glance under my lashes revealed Ray sliding his gaze across my lips before snagging on the box again. "Well, nice to meet you too, Sizzlecakes." His interest thrilled my blood faster through my veins. It had been at least 3 years since anyone had looked at me as anything more than a box opener. The guy who'd last noticed me had been wasted at a party in my parents' backyard. He thought I was holding lit cigarettes, not the sexiest of times. Echo had once tried to set me up on a dating site with her phone, so to humor her, I'd hunted and pecked my way through about half the profile questions. I stopped when it asked if I was a smoker. I slid the box closer to me and, closing my eyes, concentrated to sense if it wanted to be opened in the first place or if something catastrophic might happen afterward. The last thing we needed was another Pandora's box. When I opened my eyes again, Ray searched my face, a heated smolder in his dark gaze that clenched my thighs together. "What did you just do?" he asked. I swallowed at the deep timbre in his voice, how it seemed to vibrate the air right before my next inhale. "Just checking to see if the box is rigged to blow up in our faces. It isn't." "Good. That would be a real bummer." He smiled, lighting up my insides with a warm glow. I cleared my throat and tried to ignore the feeling. The first thing I like to try when I'm opening something is to ask it. "Ask it," he said slowly, as if tasting the sounds of the letters. I nodded. "Ask it to open." He pointed to himself. "Me?" "Since you're its owner, yes," I said. A skeptical frown pulled at his mouth, but then he shrugged. "Will you open, please?" We stared at the box, my fingers still on either side. Nothing happened. He ticked his gaze up to me with a lifted eyebrow. "And the second thing you try?" I slid the box closer to him so both of us could reach it. "Touch it." His gaze dipped to my mouth with a twitch of his lips. My cheeks warmed as I wondered what he might be thinking and if it might involve touching other things too. I could probably convince myself to get on board with that idea. Instead of placing his hands on top of the box like I'd half expected, he settled them near mine on either side. Warmth emanated from his fingertips almost like smoke. "Then what?" he asked. "Tell it to open again." "Open," he commanded, his gaze pinned to mine. "Not me," I shook my head, then flung his own words back at him with a grin. "I am not a box." He chuckled, a sound so effortless it tripped one out of me as well. "Open," he said again, this time to the box. The hum grew louder, then faded again. The candles flickered, static crackled through the room, lifting the hairs on my arms, rolling a buzz of energy across my shoulders, and even perking my nipples. Ray gazed around the workshop with his eyebrows quirked, seeming to sense it too. Lord Grumblepuss wrapped his tail around his haunches and blinked his ice blue eyes. "What did I do?" Ray's fingers slipped over mine, charging my pulse. I jerked back from the thrill, or at least I tried to. My hands wouldn't budge from the sides of the box. My fingertips could still trace the wood, but once I tried to pull them away or up onto the top, the whole box moved with me. Will you move your hands?" I asked. "No, you said to touch the box." "Ray," I said, "my hands are stuck. Please move yours." He tried to pull his hands back, but tugged both the box and me across the table toward him. Each time he yanked, his eyes grew wider. "What the hell?" "It must be the box," I said, drawing it to the middle of the table again. "I think it has a sense of humor, and now we're stuck to it." He sat back in his chair as much as he could. "I suppose now's not a good time to announce I need to use the bathroom." I gaped at him. "Seriously?" "Nah, I can hold it." He gave me a pointed look. "But too long will destroy my kidneys. So what's the next step?" I'd rarely had to move to step 3 before. The boxes had always gleefully snapped open with a simple command or a light touch. "Spell it." He frowned. "I-T?" "No," I said on a laugh. "A spell." "Ah, well, I vote to get your spelling bee started." He shrugged, his eyes twinkling more than the candle flames. "My kidneys are at risk here." I bit back a snort. What was wrong with this guy? He was enjoying himself entirely too much. Step 3 is a magical spell. I blew out a steadying breath. "Boxes, boxes, 3, 2, 1. When you open, we'll be done. Reveal your contents. Let me see. Whisper your mysteries to me." Nothing. Nada. And our fingers were still attached to the box. Ray smirked. "Did you just make that up?" "No." I fixed him with a warning look. "Not just. That spell has worked since I was 7. "You've been doing this since you were 7? "Since before that. My earliest memory was reaching my smoking fingers toward Mom's hope chest in her bedroom while she giggled with my sisters in the kitchen. It had seemed urgent in my little mind that I find out what she hoped for. The second my fingers touched the box and stopped smoking, I'd found my witchy gift. Seconds later, I'd found Mom's passport and some airline tickets, without the use of a key to fit in the hope chest's keyhole. "What now?" Ray asked. "We convinced the box to release us. Since it doesn't seem to want to listen to our voices, maybe it will listen to our words." He blew out a slow breath. "You've officially lost me." "We can write specific words on it with our fingers." "Another spelling bee, then." He gazed at me with his eyebrows lifted, a one-sided smile tilting his lips. "Think about my kidneys, Irene." Hearing him say my name stirred a pleasant warmth through my stomach. "I am aware of your kidneys, Ray." He smiled, teasing the steady thrum between us to a crackling live wire. My next breath floated in my lungs, made too light by his effect on me. I inhaled again, sorting his smell from the rose and sandalwood candles and wood varnish, and tasted snowy leather on the air. That was him, suffusing down to my toes from the inside out. I trembled. That was a powerfully heady potion. It made me want to explore it further with my tongue and all of my other humming body parts. "We'll start with the basics," I forced out in a semi-even tone. "I appreciate you not wanting me to look like an idiot in the spelling bee." I shook my head with a chuckle and then rolled my eyes to the ceiling. "Using your index finger of your dominant hand, let's spell open." His dominant hand was his left, mine was my right, so our fingers worked over the same side of the wood, though in opposite paths. Since he sat across from me, our fingertips bumped into each other the entire time. But nothing happened. "Try release." His finger mirrored mine. "Nope." "Unlock." "Negative." "Undo." "Rejected." I slumped my shoulders. Opening boxes never came to the point where my fingers were sealed to the sides, hurling random words at it. I chewed my lip and glared at it. "What about," Ray began, seeming to sense my mounting frustration. "Open sesame?" "Sure." But it didn't work either. What if we were stuck to this damned box forever? There were thousands of words we could try, but maybe none of them were the answer. This was so unlike any box I'd ever met, and I was beginning to think it might be only the second box in my lifetime to beat me. Lord Grumblepuss yawned so big, a little screech came out at the very end, and he slow blinked at the box. Hush, you, I scolded. You're not helping. You said it didn't appear to listen to our voices, and our words, obviously. But what if we try? Ray winced. Singing? I heaved a sigh. What do you have in mind? I don't know. It's humming, right? So we could, what's the word? Barbershop singers do it. Harmonize? That's it. You know a lot about barbershop singers? It's the first thing that came to mind, he chuckled. Is this the only box you've ever had trouble opening? His question, which he had every right to ask, kicked memories to the surface, eliciting a soft gasp at the reminder of what I'd lost. I tried not to think about those painful few months just 2 years ago, but sometimes a smell like bergamot and lemon or a sound like a click in a lock brought it all crushing back. Ray looked at me carefully. I'm sorry, it's none of my business. Let's do what you said, I nodded, forcing a smile. Harmonize. Okay. He gazed at me a moment longer as if to be sure I was all right. I go high and you go low? No, I go low and you go high. On 3. 1, 2. I matched the box's steady hum in my head and mentally pitched higher. Once I opened my mouth, he did too, and belted out a pleasant bass note to my soprano. When that didn't do anything, I stopped and said, You go high, I go low. Ray squeaked out a high note while I deepened my voice to a strained growl. Match it? He asked. We both hit the same note as the box. A spray of water burst out of it with explosive force. It arced up to the ceiling and rained back down again, snuffing out the candles and drenching everything. Lord Grumblepuss leapt off the table and fled underneath. Ray and I jerked back, suddenly free from the box and thoroughly soaked. I grabbed hold of the box again, blinking down at it, while water streamed into my gaping mouth. That certainly had never happened before. Ray slicked his dark hair away from his face. The water had bundled his eyelashes together, framing his eyes even darker. Several drops teased over the curve of his lips. His black Henley clung to the hard lines and dips of his torso in immaculate detail, tracing the path my tongue would sure like to follow. The sight of him right then was easily the best thing I'd seen all day. His shoulders heaved as his gaze trailed the water dribbling down my neck to my astonishingly see-through shirt that plastered to my braless boobs and puckered nipples. He swallowed while his eyes lingered, a hunger igniting in them that coiled heat between my legs. His lips parted as his gaze wandered back to my face. Box, at least 10, us, 0. No kidding. Puddles splashed behind Ray, and a great yowl sounded at the door. Echo came running to open it, and a black streak darted out. Echo looked around the room, her jaw dipping to her knees. That must have been some box. Can you find Ray something to wear while you throw his clothes in the dryer? I asked her. Sure. She nodded as she continued to take in the room. I'll get right on that. And Ray, I said as he stood, feel free to use the bathroom. He grinned down at me, both dangerous and impish at the same time, as he slipped his wet leather coat off the back of the chair. My kidneys will thank you. Echo led him out of the workshop and up the stairs, and I sagged back into my seat. That man and his box had chased all sorts of adventures through my days so far, though this was far from over. Not until I opened that box, and if that sounded like an excuse to spend more time with Ray, it wasn't. Or it was. I would plead alternative facts until I knew what to do with him. I squinted down at the box, tapping my fingers against it. Don't go anywhere. My shoes made squishy sounds as I pushed to my feet. My skirt dribbled water like multiple leaky faucets down my legs. My curls held to the sides of my face like tentacles. I was positive I looked glorious. Smoke wafted from my fingertips as I hauled myself out of the workshop and upstairs to my bedroom to change. Yes, I wore a bra this time. Lesson learned. In the workshop once more in dry clothes, I waited for Ray while blowing the smoke from my fingertips. I cleaned up a little too, but right now I needed to duke it out with the box. There were a couple more things we hadn't tried yet that might work. I turned toward the desk under the window and pulled a small box from the middle drawer. Are you on fire? I whirled around, box in hand, my fingers behaving like normal fingers. Ray stood in the doorway, a fluffy pink blanket wrapped around his waist. Only a pink blanket. His upper half was bare, with valleys rolling down his tan skin, dusted with the trail of dark hair that disappeared behind the fabric. My whole body flushed. He strode into the workshop, the blanket dragging around his ankles, and his nearness gunned my heartbeat. Echo stood behind him in the doorway, her red shoes once again on her hands, her gaze fixed to his ass. I couldn't find anything else to fit him, so I cleared my throat. Goodbye, Echo. Her eyes widened as if she'd been in an ass trance. Then she lifted one of her shoes towards her mouth and poked her tongue into her cheek in a lewd gesture I pretended not to know anything about. With a wink, she started to close the door behind her. Lord Grumblepuss slinked inside at the last minute, his distaste for water magically gone, and leapt up onto the table again to stare once again at the humming box. So, were you on fire? Ray took a seat and set his wallet, phone, and keys on the table. I thought I saw smoke. With the tilt of my head, I put on my best dubious smile. I'm pretty sure I would know if I was on fire. Yeah, you would. He didn't sound convinced. Trick of the light. I settled back in my seat across from him and opened the box I'd retrieved from the desk. Ah, so you can open boxes, he teased. I snorted. This one was much simpler than yours. I turned the box toward him so he could see what was inside. A faded bronze skeleton key with an intricate woven design at the top. Go ahead and pick it up. It looks important, like a family heirloom. Are you sure? I nodded down into the box, my fingers safe at its sides, while my smile slipped off my face. It was my sister's. Was? He hiked his thumb over his shoulder with a frown. Did you take it from her, or... Here came that devastating wave of grief all over again. Not that sister. Oh. He picked up the key. It's heavy. It's well made. Did she, sorry. I can tell this makes you sad. He traced the woven design with his thumb, but kept his gaze on me. That's the last thing I want to do. It was sweet of him to notice that talking about her pulled me up short. I nodded and looked away. So, you've handed me a key, but I don't see a lock. Well, not all keys need locks. Just hold the key like you normally would, point it at the box, and we'll see what happens. I shrugged. Spoken like an expert box opener, huh? You should put that on a sign outside. He chuckled while he waved his hand over an imaginary door. Boxes by Irene. We'll see what happens. I laughed. I could use a new sign, as well as a few new steps to opening the unopenable. Step 1, he grinned. Go to the bathroom. Step 2, be the box while you open up to the beautiful lady named Irene. A full body flush tingled the tips of my ears to my toes, lingering in several places in between. What kind of bonus point heaven had I woken up to today? This highly lickable man made it so easy to be around him, to reveal pieces of my soul regarding my sister, however small, without casting anything other than empathy, and who thought I was beautiful. I lifted an eyebrow, trying unsuccessfully to trap my smile before it bloomed across my face. If you're fishing for a discount, keep going. It's working. Nope, no discount for me, thanks. He flashed a naughty grin that just about summoned me across the table and into his lap for a taste of those sensual lips. He held the key like I'd instructed and hovered it near the mystery box. Here goes. Be ready to take cover. You too, Lord Grumblepuss. The cat flopped over on his side and lazily swatted at the box. That was more than he'd done with any of the toys we'd brought him. He usually looked at them with disdain. Ray twisted the key slowly, never actually touching the tip to the box since there was no lock. Gradually, the steady hum began to change pitch and swell into multiple notes. It morphed into a symphonic ballad I'd never heard before. It was sad, beautiful, and it came from inside the still sealed box. "Do you know the song?" I asked. He shook his head, frowning. We listened for several minutes, but I hated to move on to the last thing I knew of that might help in case the haunting tune stopped. I could honestly sit here and listen to it forever. Yet, I didn't want to keep Ray since he worked the night shift, even though I did want to keep him. Like, for good. "There's only one more thing we can try," I said. "If you go to the desk behind me, I can tell you how to make it." He nodded and rose to his feet. I could have made it myself, but he'd surely see my smoking fingers and the time it took for me to mix the ingredients. He'd accepted me so far, but that didn't mean he wouldn't change his mind once he saw I was a freak show. I wanted him to keep thinking I was beautiful, even after he left here and I likely never saw him again. He circled the table, his movements fluid and graceful for someone made from stacks of muscle and wrapped in pink. The tempo of his footsteps matched that of the box's song. His wintry leather smell reached me before he did, and I breathed him all in. I turned in my seat to watch him as he moved behind me, my fingers still touching my sister's key box. "Okay, mash up some hawthorn and garlic in that pestle there." He looked over his shoulder at me as I nodded toward the various ingredients near a couple empty apothecary jars. "What kind of person keeps garlic in their desk?" he asked. "You don't see any vampires in here, do you?" "Point taken." He ground up the items while giving me a great view of his blanketed ass and bare back. His damp hair curled around his ears, and up this close, it looked like black silk. His bronze skin was perfection, and his body heat warmed the air around him despite his half-nakedness. Or maybe that was just his nearness. Whichever ness it was, I wouldn't complain. "How will garlic and hawthorn open the box?" he asked. "Well, they're not just garlic and hawthorn. I am a witch, you know." "Yep, I figured when you said your spell." Yet he didn't seem to mind. He brushed his hands together. "What's next?" "Take a plastic spray bottle from the top there? No, that other one sprays better. And then mix the ingredients in the bottom with some water. You can use the sink in the bathroom. Check on your beloved kidneys while you're there too, if you want." "I will." He turned a panty-dropping smile on me, then mixed as instructed. Shaking my head, I released a slow breath and willed myself to stay in my seat like a proper bra-wearing witch instead of flinging myself at him. "Oh, and have Echo check on your clothes in the dryer." "Why?" "Great question." On his way out the door, he winked. "Don't open anything without me." As soon as he shut the door behind him, I collapsed into the back of my seat. His proximity from seconds ago and now his absence, pushing and pulling my body in too many directions at once. Nothing could happen between us. I was a witch, and he was a human. My fingertips smoked, and while he did, too, figuratively of course, he would never want someone like me. A freak show. I blew on my fingers and the smoke dissipated until I ran out of breath. Lord Grumblepuss, who still lay on his side, twitched his ears at the beautiful song emanating from the box and ticked his gaze to me. He didn't care about the smoke. He even allowed me to pet him. Sometimes. Why couldn't humans be as accepting as cats? I touched the unopenable box again and waited. Ray came back in with the bottle, simultaneously filling the room with his inner light and sucking the air from it. He shut the door behind him. "Did you miss me?" I chuckled since I wasn't sure he could handle the truth. "No clothes?" "She had customers, so I didn't ask," he said, taking a seat. "I did get some weird looks, though." Oh, wow. If word spread that we had a half-naked man wandering our store, we'd likely get a rush of customers. "We don't usually sell men in pink blankets." He shrugged as his dark gaze caught on mine. "Maybe you should start." "Maybe." Energy rippled between our locked gazes, spiking my heartbeat into a frenzy and pulsing a throb between my thighs. Damn. I cleared my throat. "Okay." He nodded. "Yeah, so, spray it?" "Mm-hmm." I pushed my lips together to hide the fact that I was panting. How embarrassing. He aimed the spray nozzle at the box and spritzed, but the water bent in mid-air as if the box had repelled it. Instead, it landed on my sister's key that lay nearby. The bronze sizzled, coating the air with a metallic taste. Panic unfurled in my chest. I lunged at the key. This was the only thing I had left of my sister, the only thing I'd allowed myself to look at that had belonged to her. Ray's eyes widened at the curls of smoke winding up from my hands. "Irene, are you—" I scooted my chair backward so fast it squealed against the tile floor. It was too late to flee or make a mad grab at one of the boxes. He'd seen my smoking fingertips. I clutched the key while I frantically rubbed away the spritzed-on potion until it stopped sizzling. He held up his hands as if cornering a wild animal, a frown locked between his eyebrows. "What can I do?" His voice was soft, so full of concern that it slowed my frantic heartbeat to a dull roar. "Is the key burning your hands?" he asked. "Can you put it down?" I could have easily lied to him, saying it was the key's fault my fingers were smoking, then trying to laugh it off as if none of it mattered. But a small part of me wanted to know his reaction to the truth. If I didn't do it now, I never would. Then, after he'd gone, a steady what if would torment me as haunting as the tune that carried from the magic box. What if he didn't care about my affliction, the same way he didn't seem to care I was a witch? With a thick swallow, I laid the key down on the table, slowly, so he could see the smoke still swirling from my fingertips. His gaze flickered from the key to my hands to my face, a question in his deep eyes. "They do this when I'm not touching boxes." I nodded toward my hands, clasping my fingers together on the tabletop. "No spell will stop it. Not for very long, at least. Echo smokes too, but only when she touches insects and animals. My other sister, Iris, my twin, smoked when she touched keys." Ray shifted in his chair, seeming to digest my words. "You had a twin too?" At my nod, he said, "My brother and I were identical twins." Curious. I filed that away for later. Since he wasn't sprinting from the room yet, I continued, slowly in case he changed his mind. Both my sisters could hide their smokes fairly easily since they only smoke while touching insects, animals, or keys, but because I smoke without touching a box, I couldn't go to every place my sisters went without drawing attention to myself. The other kids and teachers at school were horrible to me, so I stayed home while my sisters went. But I hated being separated from them. My sisters and I are close, but with Iris, I felt empty inside when she wasn't there. My voice broke. My chin wobbled, but I bit down on my back teeth. That empty feeling grew fangs when I tried to talk about it, which was why I never did. "Yeah, I know that feeling," Ray said softly, his gaze roaming to the box between us. 2 years ago, she came home for college break. I hugged her like I always did, and over her shoulder, I could see I stopped smoking where my fingers met her back. Ray tipped his head. "A box?" "A tumor. A perfectly box-shaped tumor. Stage 4 cancer." His eyes fell shut and he shook his head. "That's terrible." My parents still live across town. I think it hurt them to see me and be reminded of her. Plus, I couldn't live there anymore with all those memories, so I moved here to start my own shop. He nodded. "Boxes by Irene." "So now you know more about my life than you ever wanted to." I stood, a resigned sigh puffing between my lips. "I'm sorry I couldn't help you with your box." He glanced up sharply. "What, that's it?" I circled around the table toward the door, my heart heavy. "I don't know how else to help you." I hated to admit failure, even if it was only for the second time in my life. No matter how hard I'd wished to open my twin's box-shaped tumor to allow the cancer to leak out of her, it hadn't worked. Neither had the box-shaped computer she'd been hooked up to. And this humming, music-playing box I couldn't open either brought it all rushing back. "You're embarrassed," he said. I shook my head. More like disappointed. He turned in his seat, making no move to follow me. "Not about the box, but about your hands, your smoke." What I'm sorry about is that I couldn't help you with your box." I opened the door for him to go, faking fascination with the floor, and then hid my hands behind my back. You're ashamed of your skill with boxes, even though it helped build your business here, helped detect your sister's cancer. That's why you try to hide it. No, I said, the word cracking off my tongue like a whip. I'm not ashamed, and I didn't help her. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think I do. You got to say goodbye to your twin. He hefted his leg up onto the table and pulled back a corner of the pink blanket, his gaze never straying from my face. I didn't. I blinked at what he was showing me, what he was trying to tell me, but I didn't understand. He slapped his calf, and a sound like flesh on plastic filled the room. It's fake. I lost part of my leg in the same car accident that killed my twin. Air fled my lungs. I squeezed the doorknob at the crush of sorrow I felt for him. I'm so sorry. I was ashamed of this too when I first got it. He knocked on his calf again. But it's become a part of me, helped define who I am, and led me to my radiology tech position at the hospital. He gazed at me for a long moment. Just like your hands define you. But you hid your leg from me too. Not that it mattered since a prosthetic likely wasn't something you just whipped out and showed someone. Plus, it was none of my business anyway. He shrugged. You're only the second person I've shown it to. You and my mom. My chest tightened. We'd both shared something private, intimate with each other. To be trusted like that wasn't something to be taken lightly, at least for me. It meant something. It filled me with the sense that I wasn't alone in being different. He dropped his leg gently to the floor, stood, and prowled toward me, all pink blanket and naked skin. It was great meeting you, Irene. Even though the box didn't open, I had a real nice time trying. I nodded down at my slip-on shoes, too much emotion clogging my throat to say anything beyond a squeak. But I didn't want him to leave or for him to take the mystery box with him. More than anything, I wanted to keep trying to open it with his help. Lord Grumblepuss leapt off the table, as if sensing our time had come to an end. On his way to the door, he flanked his side against Ray's blanketed leg, the prosthetic one. I stared after the cat while he tiptoed out of the workshop. He hardly ever showed affection like that toward anyone, especially strangers. I'll just go get my clothes then. Ray stood close, his body heat searing my skin. His lips parted slightly. He gazed down at me with a warmth that floated a pained smile across my face. The box stopped its beautiful song. We both whipped around to stare at it on the table. I held my breath, waiting for something more. It hasn't stopped making some kind of sound for months, Ray said. Why now? I shook my head. A non-answer perched on my tongue and turned toward him. But the words fell away with a gasp when I realized our lips had a sliver of space between them. His gaze searched my face and lingered on my mouth, sparking a blazing fire in his eyes. The air charged around us, lifting goosebumps on my skin and storming a pleasant tumble low in my belly. The door swung shut behind us on its own, but I barely noticed. Ray reached out and cupped my cheek, the skin on his palm rough. His thumb skimmed to the corner of my bottom lip, then traced the seam as if testing whether or not I wanted a taste of him. Hopefully he could see the invitation written on my face, because I wanted to eat the whole blanket-wrapped package. My blood thrummed faster as I parted my lips and invited his thumb into my mouth. He closed the remaining space between us by grazing his other hand to the back of my neck. His lips fell apart with a low groan as his smoldering gaze watched me draw his thumb in farther. He tasted like salt and man, an intoxicating potion that drew my hips closer to his in the same rhythm I sucked on his thumb. With another groan, he slipped his hand from my neck down my back and to my ass, leaving a tingling trail behind his touch. With one fluid motion, he pulled me flush to his body. I really hope you read my letter now, he said, and brought my hand to his lips. Why is that? I braced my other hand on the table in case my knees gave out from our, box opening party. He winked. It has my phone number on it. I was going to mention that before, but it seems even more important now. A grin blossomed across my face at his sincerity. Okay. He fingered the length of one of my errant curls. I have to go. Should I leave the box with you in case it decides to open? Sure. I bit my lip on a sudden thought, then decided to hell with it. Maybe you'll come back soon for a status update. He chuckled. Yes, I will. And if anything happens between now and the in-person status update, you have my number. I nodded, unable to rid myself of the grin that probably made me look like an undiscovered kind of idiot, but I didn't care. We can never be too cautious. Nope. He shook his head, his whole face alight with a smile. So, tomorrow? A soft click sounded. Ray and I froze, then gaped at each other and the box. Did it just open? Ray asked. I dove for the box on the table and picked it up. A seam that hadn't been there before grooved the upper half. Ray came to stand next to me, and I tipped the box to show him. Right when you said tomorrow, I said. Was that a coincidence? Feet skidded up to the other side of the closed workshop door, and Lord Grumblepuss yowled the song of his species. Good grief! It sounded as if he were in pain. I handed the box to Ray and crossed the room to open the door, just a crack since we hadn't bothered dressing yet. The cat darted in and sat in front of Ray, blinking up at him expectantly with his big ice blue eyes. What on earth was happening here? After closing the door, I rushed back to Ray, my curiosity brimming as much as Lord Grumblepuss's. Ray stared at me with lifted brows, and at my nod, he opened the box. As he cracked the lid, I held my breath, then gasped. Inside was a small red leather bracelet studded with metal beads and a little silver bell. Engraved into the bell was the name Cupid. Lord Grumblepuss touched one paw to Ray's bare foot. No, not a bracelet, a cat's collar, for a cat named Cupid. What the what? I was pretty much lost. Ray carefully set the box on the table, took the collar, and knelt to fasten it around Lord Grumblepuss's, Cupid's, neck. Both of them smiled. So my brother was given your cat's collar, Ray said as he stood, in a box that wouldn't open until the official box opener and her Cupid cat could. Actually, you opened it, I reminded him. He grinned and stepped closer, sliding his knuckles down my arm. Tomorrow opened it. I shivered at the rioting sensations of his touch. But my next thought froze everything. Would there be a tomorrow for us now that the box was open? You should still come for a status update, I blurted, because, well, think of the customers. They'll be expecting a half-naked man wandering the store in a pink blanket. Tomorrow, definitely. He took my hand and squeezed, smoke twining around our fingers like a silk ribbon around a boxed gift. Want to come help me find my clothes? Yep, just let me find mine. Relief lightened my chest as I searched, and I was barely able to focus because I kept thinking about tomorrow. My shirt lay wadded up underneath the chair, and my underwear had wrapped itself around one of the legs of the table. As soon as I was dressed and Ray had wrapped his blanket around him, I opened the door. Lord Grumblepuss strutted toward Ray, his Cupid's collar making him look pretty handsome, and sideswiped Ray's leg on his way out. I frowned after him, then shook my head, took Ray's hand, and left the workshop in search of his clothes. They were sitting inside the dryer, still warm. His leather coat hung above the washer, completely dry. While Ray dressed upstairs, I made a beeline for Echo. She stood behind the cash register with her cricket, Billy, who crawled along her palm amid the smoking swirls climbing up to the ceiling. I threatened to smush him with my shoe, even though I would never do that. Also, holy hot mansicle, Batman, she said and winked. I didn't hear a thing, by the way, because I went outside, in the snow, away from the mansicle noises. Okay. I shook my head since I had no idea how to proceed with that line of thought. Hey, where did you say you adopted Lord Grumblepuss again? Right outside Vegas. She set Billy down next to the cash register, her smoke clearing. Why? From who? She shrugged. Some old witch who swore he was psychic. The timing fit. She'd adopted him 2 years ago, shortly after Iris's death, right around the time an old woman had given Ray's brother the box. Maybe this woman, whoever she was, practiced matchmaking magic with the help of her psychic cat named Cupid and a box that promised tomorrows. Which meant Lord Grumblepuss was hardly just a Grumblepuss at all, and that maybe Ray and I had been shot by twin arrows through our hearts. Twin arrows that were just as similar as our lost twins, helping to fill the space they once had. Footsteps thudded downstairs. As soon as Ray appeared fully clothed with his signature twinkle, my heart took flight. Once he grabbed his keys, wallet, and phone from the workshop, we crossed toward the front door together, bumping hips, arms, and fingers the whole way. When we reached the door, he thumbed my chin, his breath whisper soft. "Bye, Irene." I grinned. "Bye, Ray. Take care of those kidneys." "Always." His gaze shifted over my shoulder and turned thoughtful. "Bye, Cupid." I glanced behind me through the smoke coiling up from my fingertips. The cat perched on the windowsill, his black chest puffed out proudly beneath his collar, possibly searching through the falling snow for his next targets. Would it be an unopenable box that drew two people together, or something else next time? However his psychic love arrows worked, I vowed to help. "Thanks for the dry clothes, Echo," Ray said. She waved. "Anytime." He turned back to me with a smile full of promise. "See you tomorrow." The end. This has been Boxes by Irene, a short story. Written by Lindsey R. Loucks. Read for you by Kara Hayden. Copyright 2017 by Lindsey R. Loucks. Production copyright by Lindsey R. Loucks.